Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were two of the most famous outlaws of the American West, and their names are still known today for their daring robberies, close escapes, and mysterious disappearance. Butch, whose real name was Robert Leroy Parker, wasn't your typical outlaw. Unlike many criminals of the time, Butch didn't gain his reputation by wantonly hurting people. He was known for his careful planning and strategic heists, targeting banks, trains, and other wealthy targets without harming ordinary people. Many people even saw him as a kind of Robin Hood figure, stealing from the rich and, at times, giving to those in need. Butch's outlaw career began early, and his first major heist happened in 1889 in the mining town of Telluride, Colorado. With a group of trusted outlaws, Butch pulled off a daring robbery at the San Miguel Valley Bank, making off with $20,000, about $600,000 worth in today's money. The success of this robbery would set the tone for his life as a criminal. Butch wasn't just about stealing, he was about strategy and getting away clean. This robbery made him a wanted man, but it also made him famous. After the Telluride job, Butch Cassidy's name began to spread across the West. He even tried his hand at a quieter life for a while, using part of his stolen money to buy a ranch in northwest Wyoming. But in 1894, he was arrested and sentenced to 2 years in prison for horse theft under the name George Cassidy. In 1896, Butch and a couple of his trusted gang members pulled off another big job in Montpelier, Idaho. They stole gold, silver, and cash with a haul valued at $16,500, worth more than $500,000 today. But that was just the beginning. The next year, Butch and his crew stole $9,860, or more than $300,000 today, in payroll from 2 coal company employees in Castlegate, Utah. They ambushed the men as they were transporting the payroll by train, and this robbery marked a turning point. It wasn't long before Butch would start robbing trains himself. By the late 1890s, Butch had gathered around him a gang of notorious outlaws known as the Wild Bunch. Among the gang's most famous members was Harry Longabaugh, better known as the Sundance Kid. The Wild Bunch was known for their precision and daring, and in 1899, they pulled off one of the most famous heists, robbing a Union Pacific Railroad train near Wilcox, Wyoming. They dynamited safes, making off with a reported $50,000, an amount worth more than $1.5 million today. While it's unclear whether Butch was actually there for this robbery, it's widely believed that he took a share of that loot. In 1900, they hit another Union Pacific train near Tipton, Wyoming. This time, the gang made off with around $55,000, roughly $3 million in today's money. These daring robberies helped solidify Butch's reputation as a master of the outlaw trade, and it seemed like he was untouchable. But with the turn of the new century, Butch Cassidy began to rethink his criminal life. The pressure from law enforcement was mounting, and his gang was being hunted down. In 1901, Butch and Sundance made a decision. They would leave the United States and escape to South America. Butch was known for making bold moves, and this one was no different. He and the Sundance Kid, along with Sundance's girlfriend at a place, fled to Argentina, where they settled on a cattle ranch and tried to start fresh. However, their past wasn't easily shaken off, and it wasn't long before they were implicated in a series of robberies in South America. Butch and Sundance had gone to South America to escape justice, but the law was never far behind. In early November of 1908, after a payroll robbery in Bolivia, the two were finally cornered by Bolivian soldiers in the town of San Vicente. The popular legend, thanks to Hollywood and numerous retellings, is that Butch and Sundance charged out of their hideout in a blaze of gunfire, dying in a final stand against the soldiers. However, the truth is less dramatic and more tragic. When their bodies were found, it appeared that Butch had shot Sundance in the head before turning the gun on himself, ending their lives in a much quieter and more somber way. And yet, even with the bodies found and their deaths seemingly confirmed, the story of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid didn't end. For years after their deaths, people across the United States and South America claimed to have seen Butch alive. In fact, Butch's own sister, Lula Parker Bedenson, maintained until her death in 1980 that Butch had visited her in 1925. She even insisted that he had died under an assumed name in 1937, and she wasn't the only one to make such claims. A widely published story in 1938 claimed that Butch Cassidy had been living under the name Bill Phillips and had died in Spokane, Washington. Rumors about Butch's supposed survival only grew more wild over the years. Some believe that he had faked his death and was still out there somewhere, hiding from the law. Others told stories of Butch coming back to recover the treasure he had hidden during his outlaw days. One legend spoke of Butch hiding a large sum of money in an iron pot near Lander, Wyoming, marking the trees around it with mule shoes. Unfortunately, a fire later burned down those trees, destroying any clues about where the treasure might have been hidden. Some legends say that Cassidy hid thousands of dollars in gold and silver in the mountains and canyons of this rugged state. It's said that after he sold $21,000 from a bank and Telluride, Cassidy took the loot to a hideout known as Robber's Roost, located in southeastern Utah near the famous Hole in a Rock. But it's also believed that he made other stops along the way, possibly stashing more in Colorado. One of the rumored hiding spots is Wild Mountain, located in the northwest corner of Colorado. Local legend suggests that Butch buried $50,000 near the mountain, an incredible sum of money in the 1800s, but that's not all. Another hidden stash is said to be buried in Irish Canyon, north of Dinosaur National Monument. Here, Cassidy is believed to have buried $30,000 in silver coins, carefully tucked away in the rocky canyon, far from the reach of the law. And if they're the coins that I'm thinking about, they look a lot like this. It's a Morgan dollar dated at 1890, and this essentially was a dollar back in the Old West. So imagine this, but times 30,000. Oh yeah, also, this cost me 30 bucks. Imagine spending $30 for $1. With his gang's hideout believed to be in this part of Colorado, it's easy to imagine Cassidy and his partners in crime taking advantage of the remote terrain to stash their stolen loot. The idea of the Wild Bunch riding through the canyons, hiding their ill-gotten treasure before moving on to the next heist, makes for a thrilling story and a tantalizing mystery for modern-day treasure hunters. But despite the many attempts to uncover Butch Cassidy's hidden loot, no one has ever found it. Treasure hunters have scoured the canyons, mountains, and old hideouts, but the outlaw's stash has remained elusive. Perhaps the treasure is still buried in the deep wilds of Colorado, waiting for the next brave soul to track it down. That is, of course, if he did indeed die, or like his sister claims, lived on under a false name. It's honestly one of the stories I wish had more attention from the public. These days, there's so many famous artists that claim to be gangsters and act as though they're still a part of that lifestyle, but in my opinion, that's just childish. The real gangsters were people like Butch Cassidy or Dutch Schultz that didn't waste money on looking rich and actually were a part of that life out of necessity, not to look cool. And honestly, the most gangster part is being man enough to say you're going to take your stolen money, live out your life without ever being concerned again, which is what I would like to imagine Butch had done. As the decades passed, even into modern day, treasure hunters flocked to the west, looking for the loot Butch Cassidy and his gang had stolen during their infamous robberies. Even travelers such as Josh Gates have gone out in search of this loot, but turned up empty-handed. Big surprise. But many people have scoured the mountains of Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah, hoping to find the gold that Butch and his gang had stolen from banks, payrolls, and stagecoaches. But to this day, no one has ever found it. And you know, perhaps that's the way Butch would have wanted it. His treasure lost, just as his final escape was meant to be. But whether it be by bullets or time, he's gone while the mystery of his treasure lives on. And where mystery lies, adventure awaits. If you like what I do and you want to help support me, then the best way to do that is by joining the community on Patreon. I post my scripts and videos early, and I've even done a few videos you can only find on Patreon. But if that's not something you're into, just check out this video that YouTube seems to think you'll love, and I'll see you there.